Hi, it's Chris Titley here. As part of the Sub 11 podcast, I'm joined by James Durrant, Managing Director of ASX-listed RareX. James, thanks so much for being part of this series.
Thank you very much, Chris.
James, let's talk about, firstly, your background and your sort of intertwinement with RareX and what RareX is.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's probably pertinent to know that I'm a mining engineer with a mechanical engineering bachelor's, mining engineering master's, both from the UK. One was a military university, the other one was a mining university. So I do come from the sort of fundamentals of the industry, and I do love the mining sector because anything that we do engineering-wise in this world, any kind of exploration of the oceans, exploring of space, anything we do, every bit of human endeavor is anchored in mining, and so I quite like being a part of that very fundamental step of engineering. I came to Australia, I think it's almost 17 years ago now, and entered BHP Billiton up in the iron ore mines and worked my way through the sort of technical and leadership ranks of that very large company, and then moved to smaller projects. I had a tolerance for expanding my horizons, taking on a bit of risk in the process, and I wanted to experience different operating cultures, different corporate cultures, different country cultures, and that took me to East Africa. It's taken me to West Africa, and more recently has brought me back to Australia in this business. And I think the fundamentals of this business was all about rare earths. That was the objective of this business being formed in the first place in 2018. That rare earths were almost anchored modern technology. The electrification of things is anchored in rare earths.
And James, interesting time to come to Australia, obviously 2007, leading into the GFC, or the credit crunch they called it over in the UK, and obviously a lot of learnings through that. But when it comes to rare earths, can you describe to the listeners again how important it is, and I suppose now and in the future, and what particular rare earths that RareX is focusing on?
Yeah, when we formed, it was before rare earths had become reasonably popular. It was at a time when the rare earth price was pretty low. In fact, it's back to where it was now when the business was formed. But for a lot of people that will have followed this sector, they would have seen it's become a lot more fashionable because the requirements and the need for rare earths has become a lot more obvious in our day-to-day life. But there are some things behind the scenes as well that people may not be familiar with. So fundamentally, the main value of the rare earth group of metals is in the magnet metals. There are other uses. There's a lot of interesting uses, but they are in the magnet metals. And the rare earth spectrum of metals is 14 different metals, and they all behave the same essentially until they are extracted from the rock into their individual metal oxide components, and then they start having very different properties. The properties of the metals that we're predominantly seeing the value in is the magnet metals, but the other ones are used in sensing technology and lasers and communication technology and everything else. So they do cover an awful lot of our modern technological world. The magnet rare earths really is where you see them in modern day society, is in the electric vehicles that run around our streets now, which particularly in developed world is becoming ever more prevalent. But also they are in the offshore wind turbines, where those magnets help generate electricity in a much simpler and more lightweight fashion. It's the sort of opposite to the electric motor, is the reverse of that, is the generation. So that's the very obvious space. But the more strategic space, which is why rare earths have got a lot of traction in various governments' critical mineral strategies, and why governments are putting a lot of money into the rare earth sector, is because they are critical to our defense system. In Australia in particular, there's a supply line of rare earths that come from Northeast Asia, from Japan and South Korea, originating in China largely. They come through those very advanced manufacturing countries who put them into components. They come to Australia. Australia manufacture them into larger systems, often guidance systems, and those things are moved then into the US, into weapon platforms over there. So there's a very strategic angle that ties it all together. And in fact, the AUKUS agreement has two pillars in it. The main pillar is what most people are familiar with, which is the submarines. The second pillar is the technology, and within that second pillar is the focus on rare earths.
Fantastic. And giving context to that, and let's go back to a company level at RareX. Where is RareX focusing on, and how do you mine these rare earths, and where are your projects?
Yeah, so we formed in particular to go after rare earths, and through that early setup of the business, we acquired the Cummins Range project, which is Australia's largest undeveloped rare earth project. It's also got an awful lot of phosphate in there, and we see that phosphate as being a very good way of starting that project at a low cost before moving into the rare earths. The rare earths that are in there are dominated by the magnet rare earths, the neodymium, praseodymium rare earths. We are looking at how you develop the value chain as simply as possible and then utilize existing value chains to continue the derivative products that come from rare earths, because it is a very complicated process to extract them. There's very few companies in the world that actually do this. It is thousands, if not 10,000s of processing steps to take those 14 metals that all behave the same until they are refined to the very final point. You can imagine the chemistry and the physics involved in trying to encourage the metal to behave subtly different so that it can be extracted from the rest of the pool of metals. So really complicated stuff. We are proposing to do it in a relatively simple fashion, so that our product is then moved into other value chains. And there's not very many. The Asia Pacific is a very good region for processing capability of rare earths. Obviously, everyone would have heard of Lynas, which are already operating facility. Been operating in Malaysia for a while, doing a lot of advanced product creation from their project. They've built the Kalgoorlie facility. There's emerging producers over here in the likes of Arafura and Iluka, both of which have had substantial government investment. Over in the US, there's the Mountain Pass project, which is producing in California, and Lynas are starting to build a facility with Department of Defense funding in Texas. But really, outside of that, there's not very much outside of China. A little bit in India, a little bit in Vietnam, but really, it's a handful. And the technology has been dominated by China for so long because they've had a mine operating for, I think, about 50 years or so up there in Inner Mongolia. And it is a fantastic mine. It has all the right metals in there. But they've had a very long period of time to really get a very good understanding of how to extract those metals. And they don't give up that technology lightly, just like anyone would. They've become very dominant in that technology space. They don't want anyone else to be competing with it. There is competition growing. There's geopolitics at play to try and stop that, but the strategic angles that the Western governments want to encourage it with. So there's a little bit of a battle going on there to who can dominate the technology.
And in regards to, obviously you mentioned the price and the demand, you've painted the picture of the macro background, and coming to the progress of your mine. Can you talk about some recent announcements that RareX has had, and I suppose a bit of a timeline around how it's going to work?
Yeah, so RareX was built ultimately on the back of the Cummins Range project, which is midway through engineering. We're working on a two-stage solution for that, developing the phosphate angle first, which sounds unusual because the market is totally different to the rare earth side. However, they do often occur in the same type of rocks, and we can leverage the phosphate to bring in the rare earths. We are cognizant that we are in a suppressed market at the moment from a metal pricing perspective, so we do have to be careful that we don't overcommit to that project in the short term, but we are balancing our cash flow on that project, maintaining the key work streams to get that project into an operational state. So that's sort of midway through engineering. As a business, that's our engineering project. It doesn't require any more geological work of any materiality. So we've moved our geologists onto a new project, which we call the Khaleesi project. That was recently acquired, I think, in mid to late May. That is also a region where we anticipate to see accumulations of rare earths and niobium, sort of the critical rare earth spectrum coming up in economic quantities, because it is a wonderful geological occurrence. It's an alkaline intrusive complex, 20 kilometers in diameter. It's got all the signatures that you're looking for to say it's fertile in rare earths, it's fertile in the niobiums, which is, you could treat them as very similar types of metals. It's got the geophysical signatures that say there's been intrusions. It's coming at the right age. It's proximate to some incredible grade intercepts from other projects nearby. So we think that's really good. That's where the exploration is on. So that's sort of that starts forming the pipeline. We've got exploration, early stage, we've got mid-level engineering, and then the third pillar of our business is really the business development side. We're looking at expanding the business into more advanced projects in specific parts of the world, and that work stream in particular has been evolving. It's been public for probably a year, but it has been evolving, and we see Saudi Arabia as being a really key part of that expansion remit of that part of the business. But we also see some of the regional countries, sort of Eastern Africa, as being a part of that as well. So we're really refining our business development angle because, certainly for me, there's an inclination to grow a business. Once you've got the intellectual property learnt from Cummins Range, being able to apply at an exploration level, we also want to apply it at a more advanced level. And I think that's where the expansion comes in. We've got the ability to do it. We've got the inclination to do it. We want to be a near-term developer, builder of these types of projects, and so we're expanding in that area.
James, when it comes to diversification, obviously you've got 3 different areas of your business and projects as well. Are you looking to partner with other people along the way, or do you think having a mine outright is the way to go?
Look, I think diversification is a very important piece, and it can be from a number of angles. I think it is slightly foolish to be focused only on one project. There are inherent risks with projects, as anyone in the sector will know. The earlier the stage project, the more risk there is. The later the stage, the less risk, but the more certain the project is. There's still inherent risks all the way through. So it's important to have, I think, really credibly 3 good projects at different stages to be focused on with different aspects of the business. You create a business with a diverse skill set, and you apply that diversity in the requisite area across 3 projects at slightly different stages. But there's also inherent risk with staying in the same metal sector. Sitting with rare earths, which has absolutely become our expertise. You learn this by doing it, and you go through, I don't know, the school of hard knocks, the school of hard rocks, as some comedians like to say.
There you go.
You go through this journey of learning the hard way by doing it, and all the pitfalls, and you want to be able to apply that, because the next time you do it, you do an awful lot more efficiently, and we want to keep that. But as we've seen recently, you are then susceptible to a single commodity price fluctuations. And we are now in a period of very suppressed rare earth prices, which obviously impacts any rare earth business at any stage. It reflects through into their enterprise valuation. So when we acquired the Khaleesi project, it is a rare earth and niobium occurrence. There are indications of good enrichment on that, and it does look like a place where we'll find those types of deposits. It's also prospective more broadly for base metals and precious metals, and we're not letting that pass. When we're doing the exploration work for that, and we're in the planning phase now for a very high impact program, we're not going to overlook the other commodities, the other metal types that might be there, which we know are there. We've seen the evidence. So I think that's important to also keep a horizon to the expansion beyond just a single metal sector.
James, obviously a lot to look forward to with the business and different sort of catalysts coming through, but what's some catalysts that investors should look out for in the next 12 months or so?
I think if we start with Khaleesi, let's say, because that is the exploration project, we acquired it back in May. We've been de-risking it through reinterpretation of geophysics, reinterpretation of the chemistry. We've been reassaying the drill chips from previous project owners. We've signed an agreement, probably one of the quickest, I think the quickest agreement without compromise with the local native title group, the UNAC. So that is now gearing up for the high impact program. We've got a tenement package of 6. One of those is granted. We're progressively working through the granting of the others, working through the necessary agreements that are needed to underpin the removal of the various objections that you have, which is all part of the process. So I think you'll see that project grow into 6 tenements, all granted, all ready to go. We could be drilling it next month because we have a granted tenement and we've got some priority targets on there. Decision will be made very soon as to, do we go out there for the sake of hitting that one granted tenement, or do we wait another month or so until the other tenements are granted? and then we have a much higher impact. We can mobilize once for a larger campaign. Mobilization costs for drilling are very expensive relative to the drilling costs themselves. So you don't want to be mobilizing for small programs and then demobilizing and doing all that over again. So I think there's, on the balance of probability, we'll be moving to waiting a couple of months extra to go and do a higher impact drilling program. So that's all coming. On the engineering project at Cummins Range, the last 6 to 12 months have all been about de-risking the supply chain, and you'd have seen us doing deals on freight, on land options, on infrastructure sharing at the port to load ocean-going vessels. That's really de-risked that side. We're now focusing on starting stage one. How you start stage one, which is the phosphate stage. We call it a phosphate-enabled rare earth project. We want to start with the phosphate, want to get that moving, set the mine up around that, and then move into the rare earths. We think we've got a pathway for that. We're testing that out at the moment. We should see a material reduction in the initial capital costs for that. We anticipate results in November after we've done the trials, and that's around interestingly, it's around a fertilizer space, which is, is odd for people looking in at this and saying you're a rare earth project playing in fertilizers. There is a lot of logic behind it, but it does sound odd on the surface. And then, so that's coming for Cummins Range. And we're also, we hope to execute a mining heritage agreement in the not too distant future. We have had delays there because the native title group restructured their governance and changed their legal representative. So we had to go back a few steps before moving forward, which is a shame. And also there's quite a bit of time dedicated to what you call it, law, where you can't really engage with them. They're doing their own business. Anyway, that's there. And then on the expansion front, I mean, we're starting to get pretty active. We're structuring strategic deals. We're structuring project generation type deals in particularly pertinent parts of the world. Saudi Arabia is one of the main ones. We've been active there for 6 months now, getting to know all of the representatives that we need to know over there in government, in the ministries, getting to know Australian government representation there. Getting to know our ambassador and the embassy office, and getting to know the process of going through staking of ground, establishing local businesses, bringing on local partners. And so I think you'll start to see that ramp up materially there, as well as slightly broader in that region.
James, a very busy, at least 12 months on the horizon. Thank you so much for giving your time today to explain to the listeners out there what RareX is, the history of yourself and how you came about it, the macro background to what rare earths and phosphate can do and can produce. And I wish you all the best in the coming catalysts.
Thank you. Certainly no sleep ahead.